Welcome. Before we begin, I need you to make a simple agreement with me. Do not listen to this like entertainment. Listen to this like an operating manual. Because if you understand what I'm about to show you, you will never look at stress the same way again. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people think stress is just a lot on my mind, a feeling, a mood, a bad week. But biologically, stress is a takeover, a switch in your nervous system that changes what your brain can access, what your body can repair, and what kind of future you keep creating. And the most dangerous part is this: you can be sitting in a perfectly safe room and still live in survival, because your body doesn't respond to reality. It responds to perceived threat, and perception can be created by thought alone. Today is episode 01 of the Neural Identity Code, and we are starting with the foundation, survival mode. What it is, how it hijacks your brain, how it becomes your personality, and how it quietly steals your future. Stay to the end, because I'll give you a practical reset protocol you can use today. Something simple, repeatable, and powerful enough to begin rewiring the pattern. Now, let me paint a scene. It's a normal Sunday afternoon. Light enters through open doors. The air is soft. A home feels safe. Children are somewhere nearby doing ordinary things. Everything looks peaceful. And then the doorbell rings. 2 police officers stand outside. And in a single sentence, reality collapses. Your husband jumped from a building this morning. In that moment, something happens that most people never fully understand. It's not just heartbreak. It's not just shock. It's biology. Because your nervous system has 2 primary operating modes. One is creation. The other is survival. Creation mode is where your body invests energy into growth and repair, digestion, immunity, hormonal balance, learning, connection, long-term building. Survival mode is where your body invests energy into immediate protection, fight, flight, freeze, control, predict, defend. Survival mode is not evil. It is genius. It's ancient. It's why humans are still here. But it was designed for short bursts, minutes, hours, not months, not years. Modern life, however, has created a new kind of threat. Not a tiger in the room, not an attacker at the door, but an invisible, ongoing pressure. Deadlines, finances, uncertainty, relationships, reputation, health anxiety, social comparison, and the constant sense that something is about to go wrong. So your body stays prepared, even when nothing is happening. That is chronic stress. And chronic stress is chronic survival. Let's break down what happens in your body the moment stress turns on. When the brain perceives a threat, something unpredictable, something you can't control, your sympathetic nervous system activates. This is your emergency generator. Your pupils dilate so you can see more. Your heart rate increases so you can move faster. Your breathing changes so more oxygen enters quickly. Glucose is released into the bloodstream so cells have immediate fuel. Blood flow shifts toward your extremities and away from internal organs, because movement becomes priority over digestion. Even your immune system changes behavior. In the short term, it can mobilize, but under prolonged stress, regulation becomes distorted, and there's a critical shift in the brain. In calm states, the prefrontal cortex is more available. That's the part of you that can plan, reflect, hold nuance, create options, regulate emotion. See the bigger picture. In survival, the brain prioritizes faster, older circuits. The amygdala becomes louder. The nervous system becomes reactive. Your thinking becomes narrow. Because in danger, wide thinking is inefficient. Survival needs speed. So your mind becomes a scanner. It looks for what is wrong, what could go wrong, what might happen next, what you should control, who you can't trust, what you must avoid. That scanning feels like overthinking, but it is actually a biological function. Now listen carefully. This is why people under chronic stress often say, "I don't know why I reacted like that. I'm not normally like this. I feel like I'm not myself." They're right. In that moment, they are not choosing. They are running a program. Survival mode is a program. And programs don't ask for your permission. They execute. Now here is where this becomes a psychological prison. The brain does not know the difference between an actual event and a vividly imagined event. If you relive a painful memory with emotion, your body responds as if it is happening now. If you fear a future scenario with intensity, your body responds as if it is happening now. That is why memory is not just recall. Memory is reliving. Every time you emotionally revisit an experience, you activate the same neural circuitry. And what fires together, wires together. That is not a motivational quote. That is a foundational rule of neuroplasticity. Repetition strengthens pathways. Frequency builds structure. So if you replay the same stress story each day, you are practicing it. You are rehearsing it. You are training your nervous system to become that state. Over time, your body memorizes the chemistry. This is the part most people miss. Emotions are not just feelings. Emotions are chemical experiences. They are the biological consequences of what your brain believes is happening. A stressful event happens. The brain organizes a neural pattern. It releases chemicals. The body experiences those chemicals. And the brain tags the outer scene as significant. That tag is memory. You remember the event because you remember how it felt. The stronger the emotional charge, the stronger the memory imprint. So trauma, grief, shock, betrayal, fear, these become deeply encoded. And if you keep revisiting the memory emotionally, your brain keeps reinforcing the imprint, and your body keeps bathing in the same chemistry. That is how the past becomes biology. Your past becomes a living pattern inside your nervous system. Now connect this to identity. Your personality is basically a consistent pattern of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. If you repeatedly think the same thoughts, your brain becomes wired for those thoughts. If you repeatedly feel the same emotions, your body becomes conditioned to those emotions. If you repeatedly behave from those emotions, your life becomes shaped around those behaviors. And after enough repetition, that pattern feels like me. This is the identity trap. People don't realize they are not describing who they are. They are describing what they have practiced. I'm an anxious person. I'm just intense. I'm always on edge. I can't relax. I overthink everything. Often, that is not identity. That is nervous system conditioning. Now let's go one layer deeper, because this is where real transformation begins. Chronic stress is not just mental. It is biological budgeting. When survival mode stays on, your body spends energy on protection. And that means there is less energy available for repair, digestion, reproduction, immune balance, sleep quality, brain regeneration, and emotional stability. You are always paying an emergency bill, and if you pay that bill long enough, something else begins to happen. Inflammation becomes more likely. Hormonal rhythms destabilize. Sleep becomes lighter. Recovery becomes slower. Decision-making becomes impulsive. Emotional regulation becomes fragile. This is why chronic stress can feel like brain fog, fatigue, irritability, restlessness, compulsion, and even numbness. Because you are not living in a stable internal environment. You are living in emergency. Now, I'm going to say something very direct. Chronic stress does not only damage your health, it damages your imagination. And imagination is not a luxury. Imagination is the engine of your future. If you cannot imagine a different outcome, you will repeat the same life. Survival mode shrinks imagination because it narrows attention. When you are in danger, you don't see possibilities, you see threats. So you keep making the same decisions. You keep choosing the same patterns. You keep repeating the same relationships. You keep building the same future. Not because you are weak, because your nervous system is programmed for protection. Now let's address the hidden addiction. Yes, addiction. Stress chemistry can become addictive. Adrenaline is stimulating. Cortisol creates a state of urgency. When you live in this chemistry daily, your body begins to recognize it as normal. And whatever feels normal feels safe, even if it is destroying you. That is why some people cannot relax, because calm feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel unsafe. So the nervous system goes back to stress, not because it loves pain, but because it loves predictability. This is why people unconsciously recreate stress. They scan for problems. They start fights. They replay arguments. They over-control. They catastrophize. They look for danger. They delay peace. It is not a moral failure. It is conditioning. Now, here's where I want you to pay full attention. If survival mode is conditioned, then survival mode is trainable. You can train your nervous system out of it, but you cannot do it with words alone. Your nervous system does not change because you intellectually understand. It changes through repeated experience. Experience is what rewires identity. So the question becomes, how do you create a new internal experience, often before the external world changes? That is where the neural identity code begins. And I'm going to give you a framework, simple enough to repeat, strong enough to work. I call it the S.A.F.E reset. S for signal, A for attention, F for freedom in the body, E for elevated state. Let's go through it slowly. First, signal. You name what is happening, not dramatically, not emotionally, just precisely. Say this out loud. This is survival mode. Why? Because labeling recruits the thinking brain. It creates distance. It moves you from reaction to observation. Second, attention. Survival narrows attention, so you expand it. Without moving your head, soften your gaze. Notice the corners of the room. Let your peripheral vision open. This is not just mindfulness. This is a neurological signal. If I can see wide, I'm not under immediate threat. Your brain reads wide vision as safety. Third, freedom in the body. Survival armors the body, so you unarmor it. Unclench the jaw, drop the shoulders, soften the belly, relax the hands. You are teaching the body that the war is over. Fourth, elevated state. And this is the most important step. You choose one emotion that is incompatible with survival. Relief, gratitude, calm confidence, compassion, quiet strength. Not fake happiness, just one real elevated state you can access. Hold it for 30 to 60 seconds. If you can't feel it yet, start with the smallest version of it. A small relief, a small gratitude, a small calm. Why does this matter? Because emotions are chemical states. If you repeatedly bring your body into a new chemical state, you are training new biology. You are teaching your body a new future. And remember, the body does not know the difference between a real event and an emotionally embraced, imagined event. So when you practice elevated emotion with sincerity, you are giving your body a new reference point. This is how identity begins to shift. Now I want to slow down and make this even clearer, because if you miss this point, you will keep repeating the same cycle while believing you are just trying harder. There are 3 layers of stress that most people confuse. The first layer is the event. Something happens outside you. A phone call, a deadline, a conflict, a sudden loss, a medical report, a financial shock. The second layer is the meaning you attach to the event. What does this mean about me? What does this mean about my future? What does this mean about my safety? What does this mean about my worth? And the third layer is the rehearsal. How many times you replay the event or the meaning in your mind. Most people cannot control layer 1. Life happens. But you can influence layer 2 and layer 3. And layer 3 is where biology gets trained. Because the body doesn't get conditioned by what happened once. The body gets conditioned by what you rehearse daily. This is why 2 people can go through similar events and have completely different outcomes. One person processes, feels, releases, and moves forward. The other person replays, relives, and becomes the event. Not because the second person is weak, because the second person's nervous system stayed switched on. And when it stays on, it changes how you interpret everything. In survival mode, you interpret neutral things as threatening. A short message becomes rejection. A delay becomes danger. A silence becomes betrayal. A mistake becomes disaster. A mild symptom becomes a future illness. This is not over-dramatic. This is the brain doing what it was designed to do under threat. Protect you by predicting the worst case. That is why in survival mode, your mind becomes a courtroom. Evidence gets collected, judgments get made, and the verdict is always the same. I'm not safe. Now understand this carefully. How you think, how you act, how you feel, that combination is your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. If your emotional baseline is anchored in trauma, then your personality is anchored in the past, which means your future is predictable. Chronic stress does more. Cortisol stays elevated. Inflammation increases. The immune system becomes dysregulated. The prefrontal cortex, the creative center, becomes less active. In survival, you do not create, you react. And when the body has no energy left for growth and repair, disease becomes possible. Epigenetics shows us something powerful. Genes do not control you. Signals control genes. Environment influences gene expression. And emotional environment is still environment. If stress chemistry can activate unhealthy genetic expression, then elevated emotional states can activate healing pathways. But there is another layer: addiction. Stress hormones are stimulating. Adrenaline gives a rush. Over time, the body becomes addicted to the chemistry of stress. So people unconsciously recreate drama, conflict, resentment, fear, not because they enjoy suffering, but because the body craves familiarity. And familiarity feels like self. So how do you break it? Awareness. The moment you observe a thought without reacting, you weaken its wiring. The moment you feel an emotion without rehearsing the story, you interrupt the chemical loop. Pause creates space, and space is where redesign begins. If identity was constructed, it can be reconstructed. But reconstruction requires interruption. Interrupt the thought. Interrupt the reaction. Interrupt the emotional rehearsal. And you interrupt the future, because the future is simply the predictable continuation of today's patterns. Change your internal chemistry, and you change your neural wiring. Change your neural wiring, and you change your personality. Change your personality, and you change your personal reality. You are not broken. You are conditioned, and conditioning can be redesigned. Now here is your real question. Are you willing to stop being loyal to the emotions of your past? Now let's make the reset even more practical, because I want you to get results this week. Here is a simple 7-day protocol. Day 1 to day 7. Morning, 5 minutes of S.A.F.E reset before you check your phone. Evening, 5 minutes of S.A.F.E reset before sleep. And once per day, do this one additional step. One deliberate interruption. Pick one automatic stress habit you do daily. It could be checking messages repeatedly, doom scrolling, replaying an argument, rushing while eating, multitasking, or mentally rehearsing the worst case. Once you catch it, interrupt it. Stop. Exhale slowly. Open your peripheral vision. Soften the jaw, and choose a different action for 60 seconds. That 60-second interruption is not small. That is a vote for a new identity. Identity is not changed by one big decision. Identity is changed by repeated small votes. Now, some of you will say, "But I tried breathing and it didn't work." Let me explain why. Breathing is not a magic switch. Breathing is a training signal. If your system has been in survival for months, you will not reverse it in 1 minute. But you can start shifting the baseline. Think of it like this. If you have been walking in one direction for years, turning around is not a single step. It is a sequence. So do not look for instant perfection. Look for measurable movement. After 7 days, you should notice a slightly calmer baseline, a slightly longer pause before reaction, a slightly wider view, a slightly easier breath. Those are signs your nervous system is returning. Now I want to speak to the achievers, the high performers, the ambitious minds. Many intelligent people live in survival mode and call it drive. They call it discipline. They call it hustle. But if your success is powered by fear, your nervous system pays the price. You can build results through survival for a while, but you cannot build a peaceful life that way. So here is a higher strategy. Keep your ambition, but upgrade the fuel. Instead of fear, use purpose. Instead of urgency, use clarity. Instead of control, use skill. Instead of stress, use intentional energy. That is what creation mode looks like. Now let me close this episode by making the core message impossible to forget. Your life is not only shaped by what happens to you. Your life is shaped by what you repeatedly rehearse. Every rehearsal creates wiring. Every wiring creates identity. Every identity creates choices. Every choice creates destiny. So if you want a different future, you don't start by forcing a different life. You start by training a different nervous system, because the nervous system is the gatekeeper of your mind. When the gatekeeper is in panic, you don't get access to your best self. When the gatekeeper is calm, your intelligence returns. Your creativity returns. Your patience returns. Your power returns. And that's why this series exists. This is not entertainment. This is identity engineering. Now do the S.A.F.E reset today. And in the next episode, we go deeper into the mechanism that keeps people trapped. Emotional memory. Why the body becomes the subconscious mind. Why memory is reliving. And how to stop rehearsing the past in your biology. Subscribe, because this is a sequence, and sequences create transformation. I'm Dr. Vijay Arora. Welcome to Mind Uncovered. And remember, you are not your past. You are your patterns, and patterns can be redesigned. If you want the full neural identity code journey, subscribe and watch the next episode. And if you are ready to redesign who you are, welcome to Mind Uncovered.